generally they use 2 monitors for like
Okay.
gaming live stream, so they just go into a different tab to see the live stream.
Okay. Well, so far no.
We could come
Are
with
you
a
viewing right now? Is this you?
your video
There's
ended
zero
and I
zero
got
viewers. Okay. Yeah. See if you can type. See if you can type live right here. I'll say something.
20-second delay.
Wait. Did you? When I said test,
Yeah, test.
did that come up right away?
Here, you said test here, like 15 seconds later in the video it said test.
Okay. I just typed test in chat. All right, we're testing here. Hello, everyone. Oh, good, my chat window's working. But the question is can you hear me? And this is really weird because there's like a really long delay here. It's like 10 seconds between when I say something from when I think you can hear it. So let's see here. All right. The question is can you hear me, I guess? I think the video resolution is really bad just because it's streaming and it's, I don't know, it's all grainy and everything, I know, but just testing out the audio here. All right, Sean, that's my son. How loud is the audio? Oh, okay, great. Sorry, folks, I haven't done this in so long. Okay, great. All right. Let's see here. What about the video resolution? Is it... I should be watching this on a separate thing. Oh, great. All right. I don't know. This is a test video, but does anyone want to see something or see something done? I think I have the settings correct now. It's so stupid of me. I was working on my settings on this video software for a while, and then I realized, oh, I watched a YouTube video. There's this auto settings configuration thing that sets up all these different configurations. So that would help me in regards to this, but I don't know. Well, there's a couple of you here. I don't know. I can stamp something out if you want. Anyone have any kind of instructions for me? What you would like to see done? Would you like to see a scene? We can do whatever here. Any type of technique that you'd like to see done live? Okay, all right. Well, what shall we stamp then? Would you like to see, I've been doing waterfalls. Do you want to see something done in dye inks? Would you want to see hybrid inks, light beams, something nice and relaxing? Let's see. Well, let's stamp something out here. Well, I see someone's been depressed there. Let's try to forget about that for right now. Let's do something really, I don't know. I've been working with these light beams here and teaching about scenic lighting. Let's try something with that. It'll be a really quick and easy type of technique here, which is the best kind, you know, the ones that are easy and effective. Let's see here. Let's make it really simple, okay? I love kind of the looks of... I don't have any oxides, but I need to get some. Okay, we got some requests coming in. A waterfall. How about, okay, this is a waterfall during a sunset. And if I had oxides, I'd do it in that. But, all right. Okay, waterfall during a sunset. Let me see if I can get some I wasn't prepped here for you guys, but let me see. I do have my stamps out here. Okay, well, it'll be a sunset daytime, okay? All right, let's take a look here. All right. Okay, Sean, thanks for checking the vid out. You don't have to watch. Okay, let's see here. I've been working my Stampscapes University, beginning of that series here. And let's do something in regards to, just starting from scratch here, just building the scene. Now, I know a lot of you are experienced scenic stampers. I see your names there, but let's just start it from the beginning. What I used to tell people is to just pick out their main imagery, okay? If it's a waterfall, if it's a lake, if it's a cabin or something like that, and to stamp it out first. Everyone always gets confused when they see kind of a finished scene like this. It's where do you start first, okay? Well, we're just going to start, but not always, it's one of the larger images. It's just easier, when you're arranging anything to put those larger elements into something, or if you're storing boxes or anything, packing a closet or luggage, you put the largest things in first and you build the smaller things around it, okay? But that's not a rule or anything like that. It's just kind of an easy concept to start off with, okay? I'm just stamping this in black. Plenty of pressure, center pressuring, okay? It doesn't have to do with so much the size of the stamp, so much as it has to do with surface area. So if this stamp right here was an outline, there would be a lot less surface area, so we don't have to use as much pressure. Yeah, A-dub. You mentioned how I can use one stamp to get different effects, and that's the whole idea of this component types of stamping. If you can use one stamp for a lot of different aspects of the composition, that's the ideal type of design for me. In terms of the designing process, if you can kill two birds with one stone, it's always better to get it in one design. Okay, now we're going to make this one a sunset, so I'm going to have some sun kind of coming through here. So when we're talking about sunsets, we're talking about warmer types of colors used in the scene. I wasn't terribly prepped here, so bear with me, but I do have everything on my desk. It's kind of cramped here with my computer like this. And I know all of you know what I'm talking about, so can you imagine if you take your working space and then you add your laptop computer? You know what I'm talking about here. All right, let me just mix and match here, okay? So when we're talking about, this is what I used to do in my classes. When I used to get people in my first class, it was about composition and things like that, but it was just as much about the usage of color as anything. So what I would have people do, and it was really easy with Marvy pads because they're all color-coded on the side like this, but these days, we're just going to mix and match whatever. A lot of people have distress inks, but if you just put together any type of color scheme, okay, and mixing and matching of pads, whatever, and all you have to do is just line them up with what you think looks basically going from light to dark, okay? So something like this is an antique linen right here, walnut stain. We have yellow, pink, and orange. I mean, you can add more colors as you start to apply them and see how they, start to develop. Because we know what these look like individually, but they're going to be overlapped with one another. All right, so easy stuff. I always recommend to people to grab their pads out and to lay them out so they can see things visually, so it doesn't have to be kind of a theoretical, non-visual process. If you just lay things out from, light to dark, it'll apply on the paper very easily, okay? Here's a dark brown right here. It's added into the mix. Okay, so Let's add some other types of imagery into this scene, okay? I'm going to give myself a little bit of a head start, though. When we're talking about sunsets, that's when the types of imagery start to turn darker, and we become a lot more aware of the colors in the sky. So I'm just going to do this one in a color out of my color scheme, okay? So my preference is kind of a darker color, a medium to dark color out of the color scheme. Let's see, the question is, will you decide now which color theory beforehand, triad, etc.? Oh my gosh, I don't even think about things like triadic color schemes and things like that. That's too big for me. I just lay things out, and it's more about the values, okay? It's kind of like taking a rainbow pattern, kind of breaking it down. So I usually work through analogous colors, and it's usually, it might be something within one color scheme, okay? Just going from light to dark of any given hue, like something like this, okay? Light blue, medium blues, darker blue, something like that. But you can also just kind of break it down to the rainbow type of thing. But I usually don't decide that way ahead of time. I might go into a scene thinking I want to do like an emerald green color scheme or something like that, but I don't get too kind of advanced with any types of color schemes. I keep it really simple. So yeah, triadic color schemes, wow. Okay, so here's the thing that you have to do here, okay? When you start thinking about your color direct or your lighting direction, now this is a really simple process right here. Whatever direction or whatever area your lighting is coming from within your scene, just to give yourself a really good head start on scenic lighting, and this is the easiest thing in the world to do. If you have it coming from a certain direction, some of the imagery that you stamp into the scene just wipe off the side of the stamp facing that lighting. Okay, now here's the thing. Most people, when they start doing this, especially if it's like a darker hue that they're wiping off like this, they don't wipe off enough. They're a little bit too gingerly about it. But just do a test print of it, you know, to get the feel of how much ink you're removing from your stamp, so that when you go into your impression, you'll kind of have a better idea of what it's going to look like, okay? Now this is something that I didn't used to do before, but I mean, it's just so simple to do. You just kind of wipe off that side of the stamp facing those light sources, okay? So if I stamp something, that same tree down here, I can top light it. But if you stamp it over here, you're going to left side illuminate that image right there. And it's just going to give you a nice head start to when you start blending in your colors, okay? So this one's going over here. Let's top light it, okay? And it doesn't have to be exact or anything like that. This is just kind of a head start. You don't have to use so much things like pigment ink or something to really reinforce your lighting when it's already inherent in the impressions like that, okay? And I don't always do this. It just, I don't know. Sometimes I forget. And then when I start doing other types of touches in my scenes, like adding the white pigment ink or um, white gel pen marks for highlighting, I think, why didn't I just wipe off some color to begin with, and I wouldn't have to do all that work? I mean, it's not a lot of work, but this is just, I don't know, it's just one of those things that just really reinforces things. So you can already see the lighting kind of coming into play right here. We could have done it in green too, or something like that. Those trees could have been in black. Now, if you do things in the foreground here too, you can do the same type of thing. But you can see, you know, what that lighting did. See, right here, I could have taken off more off the top of it, which, you know, I should have, but I didn't. So, but it comes to show you that it doesn't matter so much. It's just one little head start there. Okay, so let's see. All right. Yeah, that triadic uh, color scheme. I don't know if I've ever really done triadic color schemes consciously. That's they're interesting harmonies, though. If people don't know what we're talking about, on a color wheel, there's triadic color harmonies, and it's like if you put this Y there, and if you move it in different directions, those three colors make certain types of color schemes. I don't know what they really represent or what they create, kind of from a color theory standpoint, but they're interesting to work with. There's all kinds of things you can learn on the color wheel. Yeah, sorry about that with the blur here. I have a feeling it has to do with the resolution. I don't know, I'll have to tweak that some. But they're definitely not going. These videos, these live videos, are definitely not going to be as sharp as my recorded ones. Okay, so this is going to be my color scheme. Okay, now you know how we line up our pads going from light to dark. What you do is you just go into these pads now and you work it from light to dark, okay? Now here's the thing that I always have to work with on all my really beginner scenic stampers, okay? Now if people saw this and they were just brand new to scenic stamping, their inclination is to fill in this entire area uniformly. So if it's a sky with sunset colors, they might be thinking of yellows, oranges, reds, pinks, whatever colors those might be. But they would fill in this thing completely solid. Or this area in here with these rocks, it would be filled in uniformly, okay? And this is where people think that this technique is a lot harder than it really is, but it doesn't have to be. All we have to do is retain some areas of light within the different forms. The software I'm using here for live streaming is OBS Studio. I forgot what that stood for. Something like broadcasting something. It's free software. Okay, so going into this right here, I'm just using a paper towel here. I love my stylus tools, okay? But I'm trying to use kind of household items these days. It's actually going back to like the 1980s or early 90s when this is the stuff we were using back then. And I've come to start using it again, and I don't know, I'm kind of surprised at just how effective this can be. But anyways, what you do here is a simple oscillation of light against dark throughout the scene, okay? So what you do is on the different objects within your space and the different areas within your space, it's just the retention of some of the lightness of maybe the page itself, or sorry, I'm reading some of the chats here too. Yeah. What we're doing here is we're just retaining some of the lighter areas within the space, okay? Now, here's the thing too. I mean, if this is a sunset scene and you have golden light streaming into the scene, most people's inclination is to stamp out water always blue, which you can do, you can certainly do whatever you want. But in my kind of mode of thinking, I tend to think that water is a perfect reflector of the lighting in the sky. So if you have a sunset type of scene, you'd have golden light reflecting off of that water. So I would rather use colors out of my color spectrum that we're applying in here on my water. But here's what I like to do for churning water too and moving water. I like to leave it nice and light. A lot of people like to color it in blue, so that's what I always see with kind of beginning scenes. I don't know, not all the time, but a lot, okay? All right, so here's some yellow. We just got through some antique linen, okay? I like skies kind of a little bit more streaky, especially kind of in the sunset type of situation. I should have done this one when I was in Arizona, with some red rocks and, I don't know, warm, beautiful sunset skies. Okay, adding this in, kind of using it sparingly, retaining the light of that water like that. But sometimes it's too stark white, so what I do is I blot some of this off, and you do what you would call dry brushing if you were painting, and you can just come into it like so, and to get a nice, very dry brush kind of application, a very muted version of whatever color you're working with. So using this type of methodology, you can get a full spectrum of not only value, going from light to dark of each color, but when you mute this down, it changes the intensity going from kind of really bright to very dull. And that's what it's really good. It adds to the overall richness of a scene. Okay, when you utilize some very light versions and very dull versions, okay? Usually the brightest areas in a given situation are in the shadows because they're not being washed out by super bright light. That's why colors on like a rainy day, are much brighter than, colors that are high noon on a very sunny day, okay? So remember, brightness and lightness are two different things, okay? So if you have kind of it all working within a given scene, it adds to that overall rich quality, okay? So this is what people find really hard, okay? It's when they fill in all those lighter areas like that. But all they have to do is really, you just have to kind of put on the brakes and tell them, hey, don't go so dark everywhere within a space. Leave some areas lighter. And that's kind of, it's a foreign concept if they're used to coming from the types of imagery that you would stamp out and color in between the outlines, fully, okay? But I tell people, they're doing this type of thing all the time. People stamp out something in a card, they have inks around it, and then oftentimes they add a little bit of tone around it, so giving their pieces of vignette. This is just kind of an extreme version of that type of thing, of that same aspect. Instead of using 2 colors, you might be using 5 or whatever, and going into the piece a little bit more. Anyways, I'll try to adjust the settings on this software more and more as I do more live broadcasts. I've always wanted to get back into it, but I don't know. I never had room on my table here. And I always cringed at the idea of getting back into those settings. There's so many settings, and you adjust one, and it changes the configuration of something else. But we have a pretty good internet connection now with fiber optics being installed in our community not too long ago, and us switching over to that faster connection. Anyways, you see that starting to happen? This is where people start to, this is where it starts to happen too. When people start moving into their medium to darker tones, this is quite often where, in my classes, they would lose their lighter areas, okay? It's always happening when they get into the darker tones. They get really comfortable adding tones in with their lighter ones, but then when they move into the darker ones, oh my, they kind of go right over their lights, and they lose their lights. So when you move into your darker tones, now see, the page is getting really sopping wet too, so I'm not applying as quickly these colors to the scene. So, that being said, when you ink up like that, be careful not to move in at the same rate as you did with your lighter colors because the page is getting wet, super saturated, and it's a darker color to begin with, so kind of stay on the perimeters. I do have some stylus tools tips left. I am down to my last, I would say about half bag. It was a bulk bag of, I don't know, 500. And I would have thought a long time, I started off with, I don't know how many bags of those when I heard ClearSnap was closing down and we had about maybe 2 weeks to get in our final order. I thought I was ordering 3 years worth. But then when people found out about it, some people were ordering like 10 bags, or something like that. So it was like 100 tips are gone, People were stocking up for the rest of their lives. But we do have some, and we do have some, especially for the fact that the Carson convention was canceled this past weekend, but people tend to pick up a lot at the shows. But yeah, great tools. People have logged on. You don't know what we're talking about with the stylus tools. These are the wands, and these are the tips right here. Plug right into the wands. Let's see, this one's bent a little bit. Oh, this is a faulty one. That's why I pulled it aside. But that's the tip right there. I don't send out any faulty ones. I check them all. But great tools, great applicators of color by a great company that sadly is not around anymore. I just did a video on the original Rubber Stamper magazine, and ClearSnap had that big ad on the back of their magazine. Okay, so anyways, you see where we're going right here? It's getting a little bit brighter. I want to leave some white in there for some kind of dramatic lighting too. This is walnut stain. This is where, okay, when I'm starting to use really bright colors in a scene like this, I need to mute it down, okay? It's too hot for me, okay? So if I'm doing grasses with like brightly colored greens and yellows and whatever, I don't want it looking like a day glow colored, grass or something like that. And that goes the same for these yellow, orange, red skies and whatnot. So I start to utilize a lot of brown tones, okay? So this distress walnut would be really nice. It just kind of mellows things out really nicely, but you get the intensity of the colors underneath that you want, but it just isn't so electric hot, okay? And for me, kind of a little bit unrealistic in terms of the overall appearance. And yes, that's the color box tools we're talking about. No, well, like I said, you can get the tips, but they're not being made anymore by Colorbox because they're just not around. Or ClearSnap, they're not being made by ClearSnap. I always tell people that with those, I made a video specifically for this too, the ClearSnap Colorbox tools, the do's and don'ts of how to use your ClearSnap stylus tools. And basically, you just don't want to scrub with them, but you can utilize them for, I have some tips, and I use them a lot, okay? And a lot of them were from my workshops when I used to teach with those and live demos and making tapes. But I have some tips that, I used them for 15 years. And as you know, if you've watched any of my videos, I use them heavily, you just don't want to scrub back and forth with them. But watch that video on it on my YouTube channel. Do's and don'ts of your Colorbox stylus tool, and you should be good. What happens is when people start utilizing these tools like this, the ink's not going on as fast as they think it should, so they start scrubbing it back and forth, and it'll rip in 10 seconds. But if you don't do that, they'll last over 10 years, But anyways, yeah, watch that video if you have some tips there, and your tips will take good care of you for a long time. Yeah. I want to come out with some new designs. I have some drawn. I want to come out with a whole grouping of these cool fences that I want to have enough for one whole sheet, though. I want to come out with more sets, because you can offer sets at you know, a cheaper price than you can individually. And it's a better deal for the customer, consolidates a lot of things for me too, but I just have to draw the designs. Okay, can you tell the difference here? Everything's getting a little bit more mellow here in terms of the overall mood and saturation of the inks. You get the brightness, though, of the inks, but kind of the overall feel of it is a lot more muted and, I don't know, kind of realistic looking. Okay, now, we're not even to our darkest of colors yet. The darkest of colors, it's whatever colors you stamp your imagery in, okay? In this case, it's black and dark brown. When you start working through all of your colors in there, when you get to those darkest of tones, that's when the scene, for me, really starts to come together as far as the shading goes, the lighting, and everything else like that. Everything else is kind of, the process by which to get to that. You'll benefit from all of those colors underneath there, but it really comes together kind of cohesively when you get to those colors. Okay, any substitutions? Well, I don't know, you're watching it right here, paper towel. Unless I know crafters, we love getting stuff, and tools and things like that, but this is the second best thing that I found. And there's no doubt that this paper towel type of effect, this wadded up paper towel, it's a really ergonomic design, okay? It's like finger painting or something like that. So, what this paper towel is not great for, let's say when I start getting into some of these darker tones like this sometimes, if it becomes really wet on here and saturated, sometimes a paper towel being very absorbent like it's supposed to, um, I can't apply as much ink because I'm doing like this wiping type of motion on here. It's a wiping type of application of ink, okay? But sometimes if you have something that's a little bit more absorbent like a sponge, you can absorb moisture into the sponge, and when you apply it, it'll apply more ink on there than if you're wiping it on there. I mean, I can dab like this too, which I do, but I can get some, it picks up some of the texturing of that paper towel. Sometimes I get, those little textures on the paper towel itself that, I'm not really going after. So that's where the stylus tools kind of come into play. But I don't know. I haven't tried it yet, but I think like a old rag, like a cloth T-shirt or something like that, might even be the best of tools. Because it doesn't have quite the texturing of a paper towel. It has kind of a nice, perfect absorbency factor. I mean, you can take it and wring it out under the sink and rinse it out. I would chop them up into squares about the size of napkins or something like that and try that out. I haven't had to, I've just been using paper towels, but I did some demonstrations last week, or what was it, 2 weeks ago at this point in time at the Mesa, Arizona convention. It's the first time I've just kind of gone only with, paper towels. Well, I'm trying to remember. No, I guess I did use some of my stylus tools, but I don't know. They did pretty well. My fingers were completely coated in ink though after like 8 hours of or I don't know, whatever it was, of nonstop demonstrations. I even had ink on the, I don't know how, it was on the back side of my fingers too. I guess when I'm going like this, and if I have my finger kind of in there like that, in that little pocket sometimes, I guess I got ink on my fingers that way, so they were just absolutely coated. But again, that was, I don't know, after 15 scenes of, demonstrations like that. So anyway, there's those browns in there, but you see how that's really coming together like that? You can do other things too. If you want more pink in here, if you want more red, You can always go back to a lighter color too, so you don't have to, you know, it's not the end of the road if you get to black or something like that. And if you think, you know, you should have used a little bit more of one color or another during that process, just go back into it and add it right back in there. Okay, adding black, this is where things really start to come into play as far as shading, the definition of form, okay? This is really going to give visual weight to the scene. And what I do is I stick to the shadow areas first, okay? And in the design itself, there are darker areas within the design, and all I do is I just kind of go in and reiterate that a little bit with some more color, okay? You can do it through the, you know, throughout the color scheme and value scheme that you're working with. Do you see how that really starts to really pull things together? And then if there's a lighter area on the design itself, I tend to leave that as is. I mean, you can put a little bit of tone in there. If it's really bottom weighted down here, a lot of darks down there, then you can kind of add a little vignette up here with a little bit of a darker tone. Doesn't that contain the image really nicely like that? And then what we're doing is we're just kind of going like that and kind of tapering that edge like that. Okay, now here's going back to the stylus tools. One of the things with the stylus tools too that people are doing is, I don't have the tips on this one, but if they're working like this, okay, and always keeping their scene upright, sometimes they're not working in the most ergonomic and easy stroke that they can be doing. So what you do is you just change the angle of your piece, okay, in the direction that's going to be the most conducive to the mark that you're applying, okay? So in other words, don't work like this, awkwardly like this, okay? If you want to get over here, then just tap it like that and work it in like that, okay? But that'll give you a more graceful type of mark in addition to the most comfortable motion to apply that mark. And in turn, it'll save your tips, you know, from being kind of worked at a very awkward angle, which I think contributes to the, I don't know, the longevity, you know, or the lack of longevity with a given tip there, okay? So if you want to get on this side, turn your card and get, you know, put it in that direction right there. You don't have to have everything kind of, you know, vertical or upright when you're applying it. If I want to get here, I'll work on my scene upside down like this. I'm just concentrating on that one little area like that. So I don't know, maybe you know, maybe stylus tool tips are cheaper than, you know, paper towels and things like toilet paper at this moment, you know. I thought, you know, I can save some people some money these days with, you know, using a paper towel, but maybe these things are like worth their, you know, like gold now or something like that. I don't know. Kleenex, crazy. All right, but there's your black there, and didn't that really kind of bring things together? Look at that, you know, that dramatic look there too. If that's a little bit too stark, don't go into it with your darkest color. Just go into it with, you know, one of your lighter colors. One of the things I was showing on one of my recent videos, I think I called it the healing waters or something like that. One of my favorite combinations is to use pink within kind of a general brown scheme like this. So if you want to go for a little bit of a change in hue, go back to your pink. There's this other pink right here. Whatever pink you want, or red or whatever. Okay, I'm using a new paper towel here. Let's go in here, and I don't know, on this live video, I don't know if you can see this, but look at that different hue that's being introduced into that mix right there. See that right there? And let's bring some of that down here into the waterfall as well. Okay. And why not have a little bit of it reflecting off of some of those waterfalls, like so. Okay. You can put some on the rocks there, like that. It's just this kind of subtle little touch that you can put into things. Let me get a more muted version of this too. Okay. So it's something like this. Got a lot of color and texture working in there. Now let's get interesting here. This is the thing that I really like to do. If you've watched any of my videos, it's just taking some cotton balls, or a cotton ball, and let's hit it with some pigment ink. Okay, now here's the thing. This white pigment ink is supposed to represent kind of mist in the air. It would be moisture in the air, right? So if I didn't retain, I barely kept any of it right there. It's a little tiny bit of white. I almost blew it there, you know, in terms of being able to add this in here, because if I don't have white somewhere in the lighting, this white illuminated, you know, churning water at the base of this waterfall would look kind of out of place. So let's try this right here. And we're going to add it where light meets dark, okay? I'm not going to add it here in the shadows because we're not going to have that kind of illumination over there. But let's just start adding it in from here. Let me see if can I zoom in here? Okay, here. I'm going to try to keep this within the field of view, so let's work it on a horizontal like this. Remember, I don't have to have it upright all the time, but let's see if we can see this right here. See that kind of softness being introduced to that area? It's kind of illumination too. Now this is just your regular white pigment ink. Okay, it's not. There's only one type of pigment ink that you wouldn't want to do this with, and that's the Brilliance White. It dries too fast. Okay. With this right here, if I don't like it, I can even just wipe it off afterwards, even after it dries. Okay. See that kind of illumination right there? Isn't that fun? But if I just add it in one area, it kind of stands out kind of awkwardly, you know, in terms of the texture, so I add it in other areas. Let's add it in another part of that waterfall. About like so. You see that right at the base of the waterfalls where that churning water is? Okay, now I've added, there's a little bit of area up here. I'm going to put some of this onto that tree, kind of where we gave ourselves a little bit of a head start in the lighting right here, see? And I'm adding some of this white pigment ink over it. And that, in turn, illuminates that part of the tree a little bit more, or the side of the tree facing the light. Sorry, I'm right over the front of it where you can't see that. Okay, you see that right there? All right. So lighting kind of coming into play. Now that's a real soft light and a soft application of light on dark. But one of the things that I love doing is I love playing around with texture. So we'll take our bleed-proof white here. Okay. So there's a really super soft looking illumination in here. Oops. I didn't wash off my toothbrush here, so it's completely crumbly with a dried paint. I'm trying to clean it off by just kind of flicking it off. All right, does anyone watching it have bleed-proof white? If you don't, I would really recommend the bottle. It's so much fun. And you just have to use your old toothbrush here. Right. Inking up, hopefully I have it the right consistency. If you don't, just add more water to it. Really get a lot of that off. I don't want to use a lot of it in here. This scene is fairly dark, so I'm not going to have this like huge kind of explosion of splashing water, splashing illuminated water in this scene. Okay, so let's see if I can. Here, let me try to get this so you can see it here a little bit easier. I know this video isn't, this live broadcast isn't ideal for showing tight detail, but let's see if you can see it a little bit. Okay, so I'm about 1 inch away from the scene, and I'm just kind of very slowly pulling at some of these bristles on here, trying to point it in the general direction. Sometimes it doesn't cooperate because, you know, the splashes kind of go in a different direction, but you see that right there? Right around here. Let's get some over here on this side, and then I'll hit it up here a little bit. I came back from that show in Arizona, and my toothbrush had kind of been smashed, so it's not cooperating with me quite as much as it did before. In terms of my direction of the spray, I don't know what happened. Didn't like being packed away like that. All right, but anyways, here we have this kind of, it adds a kind of a dynamic look to it. And I can add these types of little spray patterns dot by dot with a white gel pen too. But there's something to this kind of random size and spray pattern that's really fun when it comes to your scenes, something like that. And I mean, when we're viewing this at arm's distance like this, I mean, it's not so critical, but I always mention to people, when you kind of invite people, the viewer of your scenes, in for closer inspection, and you reward them with little, details like that, I don't know, it just adds that extra little special touch to a scene, or to a visual, any type of visual like that. Anytime you have kind of little details like that that reward viewer for retained attention, it's always nice. Okay, so we have that. Let's add a little foreground in here. In my Stampscaping University videos, I'm just kind of adding in those foregrounds to begin with, just so people can get comfortable with the idea of composition and seeing everything about how it's going to be placed. But on here, here's the thing. I just kind of retained the last steps of the video for my foreground, so that things like these splashes on here and that pigment ink application right in the background right there would not be in front of my foreground imagery. So I don't want those, that spray pattern to be in front of my branch if I stamp it down here, or reeds, or whatever it might be. Okay, when we put the top coat spray, does the bleed proof run? No, it doesn't. That's a great question. Some media could potentially run, but when you're spraying like an acrylic spray, what she's referring to is, in terms of the top coat, is if we spray these with like an acrylic spray, such as a Krylon or something like that, or a workable fixative. When we're working with cans like that, those cans are like solvent sprays, okay? So they're not water-based. So the bleed-proof white is a water-based medium, so it'll stay as crisp as it looks when applied like that, okay? Some of the things that can run a little bit, but I don't really worry about it too much, are things like alcohol markers. If I put some alcohol marker touches in here, that can go back into solution with a solvent spray, okay? But there's an easy solution to any of that, though. Just kind of adhering to your spray paint styles of a methodology. What you do is if you have something that might potentially run, like alcohol inks or something like that, if you're working with a StazOn ink, waterproof inks for maybe your main imagery, that could potentially run. Sometimes pigment inks can run too, even though there's water-based, maybe because they're thick and they're staying on the surface of your paper. What you do with a spray is you just give it a quick spray, so that it just kind of barely coats your scene, and it dries very quickly. It dries faster than it has a chance to bring something back into solution and to make it run, okay? And then you can hit it with a thicker spray. So you hit it thin, let it dry completely, maybe hit it with a couple different coatings of it, but very lightly. You know, I'm talking about, 8 inches, 12 inches away or something like that. And just let it seal off, and then hit it with a thicker spray. Okay, now I'm using a VersaFine Black for this. We have a very dark scene like that, but look at the richness of that impression right there. It's very dark and black against that background. Okay, now see what the benefit of stamping out those trees in a lighter color did. It looks like they're much farther back in the distance than if they were stamped in the same value as these foreground images. But the waterfall stamp is done in black. I mean, we could have stamped that in dark brown as well. But it really pays dividends when you save your closest things to the eye for the darkest of black imagery, okay? Now, one of the things about using pigment inks, and VersaFine is a pigment ink, is you don't want to stamp things over the top of it or do too many techniques over the top of it, because pigment inks stay on the surface, so they would have a tendency of smearing and dragging, even when dry, if you apply anything over the top of them. So those are my last steps always, and I don't know, they're a really good choice for foregrounds. I didn't used to do that all the time, but I don't know, I thought Marvy Black was super dark, but doing a value comparison between the two of them, when you stamp out that VersaFine Black next to a Marvy Black, this is the Marvy Black right here. I don't know, Marvy Black looks like a 95% or something like that. That being said, Marvy Black next to a lot of different ink pads out there, they make some ink pads look like, I don't know, 75% gray or something like that. They are just one of the darkest of the dye-based inks, at least. Okay, so here we go right here. Some decent depth in here, so we have our sunset. Well, if it's so much of a sunset, it might be more twilight. It's getting towards sunset. Maybe it's just behind some kind of clouds in the background or something like that. Fun stuff, though. I mean, this is a very simple composition. I could have used that same oak branch down here, kind of as bushes coming from underneath. And it could have been an overhanging tree limb as well. So something to kind of just frame your scenes off like that. All right. Okay, so I am curious about the quality. I need to go back and check out this video and see if I can make some tweaks in terms of the sound and video quality. Thanks for bearing with me on this test video, and thanks so much for logging in to check it out. Does anyone have any questions or suggestions? Maybe we can take requests in terms of what the next live video will be at, and I'll try to schedule one sometime so that everyone knows when it's going to be happening. I just wanted to play around with the software this time around, so I'm just glad anyone joined in at all. But it was great to get the feedback too and the questions. So here is your scene right there. I need to get my gold pen working, because this would be really great with some little gold speckles down here, or something like a Wink of Stella gold pen marks down here in the water, in terms of having something really reflective down there. That would be really fun. Okay, so anyways, thanks again so much. Thanks again for everyone. I recognize a lot of names there. Thanks so much for your support of the line, and so on and so forth. Drop me a note with any questions. I don't think you probably have any, but anyways, yeah, drop me a note anytime. So I will say thanks so much for joining me. Yes, we will do some more live streams, and I'll try to improve the quality for you guys as well. So, yeah, thanks so much. had fun. I really enjoy that. It's like going in an AOL chat room or something like that, like we used to do back in the day. All right. Okay, thanks again. Signing off.